Well, have you guys ever had one of those days where you're having like family over to the house and like a bunch of people are coming over and you've worked so hard to get everything all ready and then it's time for them to arrive and the oven catches on fire and something explodes and the kids are all naked and they're spilling like a gallon of paint on the carpet and then they walk in and that family of raccoons that's been living in your attic that you didn't know was there all of a sudden comes out and is running all over the house? Ever had one of those times? That's kind of like the Sunday that we're having today. It's kind of like that, where just things aren't working the way that they're supposed to be working, and people got sick, and people can't be here. It's just one of those Sundays. So we thank you guys all for your grace, and we promise to extend the same grace and even more right back to you. And so thankful for our teams that are working so hard to pull everything together when things just don't seem to be working right. Such a testament to your guys' commitment and your perseverance, and we appreciate you so much. But we're glad to be here with you guys. If you're here for the first time and your name's Pete, thanks for joining us. We're so glad to have you. Pete, on you near the chair is something that we call the KC Connect card. And if you want to get involved here at Key City Church, use that card. That is one of the easiest ways to do it. If you want to join one of the groups or join one of the teams, you can do it through that card. Just drop it off in the basket on your way out. Yeah, you put some information on there, trade it with us. We'll give you a free t-shirt for both of you guys on your way out the door. Or if you want to afterwards, you can do all the same things through our website at keycitychurch.org. So we're glad to have you here. Glad to have all you guys here. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're so happy to have you because today we are continuing our conversation that we started 4 weeks ago, a conversation that we're calling What Makes You Happy. And the reason we're doing this series and the reason we're so excited about this series is number one, because who doesn't want to be happy, right? We all want to be happy. In fact, it's happiness that pretty much guides most of what we do. And we really get down to the bottom of it, the things that we do, most of what we do because we believe in some way, at some point, it's going to make us happy at some level. So we're these happiness-seeking creatures. And what's so fascinating about this to us, and I hope you guys are as fascinated as we are, what's so fascinating is that as happiness-seeking creatures, we are terrible at predicting what actually makes us happy. In fact, as we pursue and seek happiness, so often that pursuit of happiness ends up undermining and so often ends up sabotaging our own happiness. So while we're these happiness-seeking creatures, we're terrible at knowing what actually makes us happy and doing what actually makes us happy. So through this conversation that we've been having for the past 4 weeks, we've been exploring why is it that we are so terrible at predicting our own happiness and how can we get better at it? And so, just to get us all on the same page, what we've been doing every week is we've been defining the terms. And so to talk about what we mean when we say happiness, the technical definition that we've been using for it is that happiness is subjective well-being combined with a sense of purpose and meaning. So it's kind of like how we feel in the sense in our overall lives of our lives having purpose and meaning. Or a more casual definition for happiness is happiness in our lives and happiness with our lives. And we know you're not supposed to use the word and the definition of the word, but we're all about breaking some rules here. So happiness in your life and happiness with your life. And now we recognize, and we've said this every week too, we recognize that happiness is a complex thing, and while we don't intend to oversimplify happiness, and we know that there are a lot of individual factors that factor into happiness, there are genetic factors, there are personality factors, there are cognitive factors, there are experiential factors. There's a lot that factors into people's happiness, and so we don't mean to oversimplify it or pretend like the same program is going to work equally effectively for everyone. We recognize that, but at the same time, we recognize that there are observations that we can make and there are conclusions that we can draw that tend to be mostly true for most people most of the time. And so to get us into what we're going to be talking about today, the observation that I want to make is that there is this question that we often tend to ask ourselves at some point or another, or at a lot of points or another's, or in certain seasons of our lives, even when we're not consciously aware that we're asking this question, we all have this tendency at some point or another to ask this question: am I happy? Am I happy? Am I happy in my life? Am I happy with my life? Am I happy in my job? Am I happy in this neighborhood? Am I happy with the house that we have? Am I happy with how the kids are growing up and learning? Am I happy in my marriage? Am I happy in this relationship? Am I happy with the direction that my life is going in? Am I happy with the direction that this relationship is going in? Am I happy? Right? We ask this. And what I find so fascinating about this question, and maybe you'll find this fascinating too, is when you ask this question, am I happy? How do you even know? How do you evaluate whether or not you're happy? Like, what is it that you look at to know whether or not you're happy? Because I think what we're maybe a more accurate way of asking this question, what I think we're often asking when we're asking this question, is maybe more along these lines. Am I happy enough? Right? Am I happy enough? Am I happy enough in my life? Am I happy enough with my life? Am I happy enough? And what's so fascinating about this is, again, how do you know? What is it that you take your happiness to measure it against, to know whether it meets the threshold for you to be sufficiently happy, right? There's no objective metric that you can take your happiness total to and know okay, I now have enough happiness. That doesn't exist. And we know, and you guys know this, that there are surveys online that you can go and find inventories where you can answer some questions and it'll tell you how happy you are compared to the average. But we know this, if you were to go home this evening and you're asking this question, am I really happy? And in bed before you go to sleep, you just pulled something up on your phone, happiness inventory, and it said, you know what, guess what? You're happy enough. Do you walk away from that any happier than you were to begin with? No, because we don't trust a survey. We don't trust some objective standard to tell us whether or not we're happy. We know if we're happy enough. But how do you know? How do you evaluate it? What do you measure it against? What do you compare it to? Here's what we compare it to. Here's what most of us compare it to. We compare our happiness to everybody else, don't we? How happy am I compared to everybody else? Am I as happy as them? Am I as happy as all my friends that I see when I'm scrolling through Facebook or Instagram? Am I as happy as them? Compare ourselves. Now, you don't do this, right? I recognize, you don't compare yourself to anybody else. You don't compare your happiness to anybody else. I mean, how insecure do we really think you are? You don't do this. You never scroll through Instagram and get jealous because your friends are traveling to places that you've never been before. You never get jealous because your coworker got the promotion that you thought you were going to get. You don't compare yourself to them who have the bigger house than you, that live in the nicer neighborhood than you. You don't compare your kids to the kids of your neighbor that got into the school that your kids couldn't get into. You don't compare your income to anybody else's income. You don't compare your body to anybody else's body. You don't compare your career trajectory to anybody else's career trajectory. You don't do that. You are not that insecure. We get that. But even if you did, even if you slipped up and maybe compared yourself once or twice to somebody else, even if you did that, it's okay. It's okay, because it's exactly what the whole rest of us are doing all of the time, because this is just what we do. We compare ourselves to others to know how happy am I? Am I happy enough? Because what else would we compare ourselves to? Now, the reason that we do this, the reason that we have this tendency to compare ourselves to everybody else is because we have this driving belief that just doesn't go away that says they're happy, And I'll be happy too when I have what they have. They're happy, and when I have what they have, then I'll be happy too. Like, we believe this. We don't say it, we wouldn't state it, but deep down, like, that is what's driving this comparison. But there are two assumptions that we're making here, and they're big assumptions. In fact, they're inaccurate assumptions. And the first one we all know. The first assumption that we make when we think this is that they're happy. We know better than that, right? We've seen it happen enough over and over again in life that the people that you had compared yourself to and thought, like, if only I could have their life, if only I could have their marriage, like, you've gotten close enough to those people to see behind the curtain, and you know that what they have, you really don't want to have, even if it comes with a house, even if it comes with a career. Like, you've seen what they have, and you don't want to have what they have. We've seen the people that seemed like they had it all, and then they lost it because they weren't responsible with all that they had. Like, we've seen behind the curtain, and we know better. We know better. We know that they're not happy. So that's just the wrong assumption. It's hard to convince our brain of that, but it's not true. They're not happy a lot of the time. But the other thing is that we think we'll be happy too when we have what they have. Like, we really think that. But there are three reasons that that's just not true. And the first one is because of this thing that happiness researchers call hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation, which is just our brains are wired so that we, as human beings, just get accustomed to any circumstances that we find ourselves in. We are very adaptable creatures, that as much as our circumstances might change, we have this tendency to adapt to those circumstances. And when good things happen, like if you moved into a bigger house, you got the bigger income, you got the better whatever you're looking for, you got the bigger thing, you would be happy about it for some number of weeks or months. But then you would adapt to it, and it would just become normal, and you would go back to your previous levels of happiness. And researchers have proven this over and over and over again, that the things that we predict will make us happy, if we just get those things, once we get them, it makes us happy for a little bit, but we always return to our previous levels of happiness. So, hedonic adaptation, the other thing is that we have upward comparison. We always compare ourselves to the people who have a little bit more than us, they're a little bit further ahead, that have a little bit newer or nicer than we have. We always compare ourselves just a little bit upward. And what happens is that we compare ourselves upward, and we get what they have, and once we get there, you know what we do? We compare ourselves to the people who are just a little bit further ahead than that. We compare to the next rung up and the next rung up. And you know what? There's always somebody who's a little bit further. There's always somebody who has a little bit more. And so you never actually get there. And while we do these things, the third thing that happens that keeps us from ever being happy when we have what they have is that we're forming habitual discontentment. That when we evaluate our happiness by comparing ourselves to others, we're building a perspective, a habitual perspective. We're building neurology. We're building habits and practices that tell us that our happiness is relative to everybody else's happiness. And those habits and those perspectives and that neurology, guess what? Once you get what they have, all of that comes with you because we've trained ourselves to be discontent. And so now, no matter how far we go up the ladder, no matter how well we compare or who we compare to, we've built a habit of discontentment that comes along with us. And it doesn't get resolved regardless of how much you get, right? Because you've trained yourself to be discontent. We haven't learned how to be content. And if you haven't learned how to be content with what you have, if you haven't learned how to be content with where you are, if you haven't learned how to be content with who you are, there is nothing you can get. There is nowhere you can go. There is no one you can become that will make you content because you haven't learned how to be content. So it leaves us asking the question, what is the secret to contentment? What is the secret to contentment when everybody else seems to be further ahead, when everybody else seems to be getting the opportunities that we're not getting, when everybody else seems to have an easier break in life? How are we supposed to be content? Here's the funny thing about comparison and about discontentment and contentment. It's not just, this is so funny, it's not just about us getting as much as they have. Isn't it true? We would be just as happy if they lost what they had and had as much as us, right? Like, isn't that in there? Like, we would be equally happy if they didn't have as much, if they had as much as or a little less than us, right? So it's comparison. It's comparison. So where do we find contentment? What is the secret to contentment when we look around ourselves and all of the data seems to be suggesting you don't have as much as, and you're not as happy as? What's the secret? I think we even have a slide. I don't want to skip the slide. Nope, we don't have a slide for that. So go back, please. Thank you, sir. That question about the secret of contentment isn't a new question. It's not new to our generation. It's not new since Facebook or Instagram, even though I think those things exacerbated it. It's not new to us. It's a question that people asked 2,000 years ago. Since people have been asking questions, that's been a question that people have asked. And so we're going to look today at the wisdom that is spoken into that question by a man named Paul. And what makes Paul's perspective and his wisdom so interesting to us is that Paul, 2,000 years ago, was a man who was a Jewish Pharisee who was persecuted. And this was after Jesus' death and resurrection, and the Jesus movement is beginning to grow and spread. Paul becomes a persecutor of the Jesus movement and is overseeing the execution of and is putting in prison followers of Jesus. That is until, as Paul tells in his own words, he encountered the resurrected Jesus. And then Paul himself became a follower of Jesus. Paul was an eyewitness of the resurrected Jesus. And Paul, his whole life turned around. And Paul became one of the most influential people who caused the biggest spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire during the early church. And so Paul planted churches throughout the Roman Empire, and then through the rest of his life wrote letters to those churches to encourage them, to guide them, to help them along. And we have a lot of those letters that Paul wrote in the New Testament portion of our Bible. And so Paul's perspective, as someone who was an eyewitness of the resurrected Jesus, Paul has a very fascinating perspective. And Paul had been through a lot. He'd seen a lot. He'd encountered a lot. So Paul's wisdom becomes fascinating to us. So he writes one of these letters to a group of followers of Jesus in a city called Philippi. And what's interesting about this letter, like other letters that he wrote, what's interesting is that he wrote this letter to them from prison. And so Paul, in prison, is writing this letter to the Philippians who are not in prison. And the theme of this letter, compared to all the other letters that he wrote, the theme of this letter is centered on joy. That Paul, who is in prison, is writing to people not in prison and inviting them to share in his joy. It's like Paul in a prison cell saying, "It's so happy, people. Come on and be happy with me." And so the Philippians get this letter, and just imagine, you're being encouraged to be happy by someone who is right now in prison. I mean, just imagine, it would cause the Philippians to be like, why are you so happy? Like, how can you be content? Like, we're not in prison, and we're not even content. Like, what is it that you know that we don't know? And so that's what Paul lays out in his letter, is where the source of his joy and his happiness and his contentment comes from. He has his listeners piqued to hear the secret wisdom that he has that they don't really quite know how to get to. And so as Paul writes this letter, as he gets to the end of it, and where we are going to pick up today, Paul is thanking the Philippians for a gift that they had sent him. So he's in prison, he's in need, they get together some finances, they send it to him to be a blessing to him, and Paul's this part of his letter is like just a thank you note to the Philippians. And here's what he says. He says, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. Paul's like, I rejoiced greatly over your gift, which they're thinking, but Paul, you're in prison. Why are you rejoicing? He's like, trust me, I rejoiced greatly, to which they're thinking, it wasn't even that much. Like, it was nothing. And Paul's like, trust me, I rejoiced greatly over it, to which they're probably thinking, like, it must be really bad. Like, you must be desperate to rejoice over this. Like, it was nothing. And Paul goes on. He's like, no. Because listen, I'm not saying this because I'm in need. Like, I didn't rejoice greatly because I was so desperate and this finally came and satisfied me. It's like, I would have been fine without it. I appreciate it. I love it. I rejoice with it. But I also would have rejoiced without it. Because listen, because I've learned to be content. Let's say that together. Content. And one more time. Content. Paul says, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. To which we'd say, whatever the circumstances? Like, even when your neighbor's kid gets into the school that your kid couldn't get into, like, you're still content? Paul's like, yeah. Even when all your siblings are planning to retire early and you're not going to be able to because you weren't able to save enough, you're still content? Paul's like, yeah. Paul, come on. Even when you're scrolling through Instagram and everybody seems to be traveling internationally, but you've never been out of the state, you're content? Paul's like, yeah, whatever the circumstances. And so they're leaning in, the Philippians, who were receiving a letter about contentment from someone in prison. And they're wondering, what do you know? And Paul says, I know what it is to be in need. And Paul did. Because as someone who is perpetuating the Jesus movement during a time when the church was being persecuted, Paul knew what it meant to be in need. Paul was shipwrecked multiple times as he carried the message of Jesus around the Roman Empire. Paul talks about how when he was stoned to what those who were putting him to death thought was death. He was stoned to the point that he was incapacitated. They dragged him out of the city because they thought he was dead. Paul was stoned almost to death. He was beaten multiple times. He was arrested. He was hunted down. There were times when he was homeless. There were times when he didn't have enough food. There was times when he didn't have enough clothes. Like, Paul was someone who understood needs. He says, like, I know what it is to be in need, but I also know what it is to have plenty. It's like, this isn't just a mental trick that you do because you don't have enough. It's like, I'm telling you, there's a way to be content when you have little and when you have plenty. Because I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Paul has, now just imagine sitting across the table from Paul, this man who's in the second half of his life, who's moving in towards old age, this man who's lived this rough life, who's frail because he hasn't always had access to food. Food that he had didn't have much nutritional value. This man whose body and face are scarred from being hunted and arrested and tortured. This man who often didn't have a home, often didn't have enough clothes. This man who never had a 401k, never had a retirement plan, never had finances to fall back on. You're sitting across this table from this aging man who's been beaten and battered by life, and you find someone who is content, who just has peace around them. And you've met these people, you know these people. You're sitting across from the table from Paul, and he just has this peace. He has so much less than you've ever had, and yet he has all the happiness that you're after. And you're wondering the same thing that they were wondering. What do you know that we don't know? What do you understand about contentment that we're still grasping for? And Paul says, I can do all this being contentment in any circumstances. I can be content no matter what. I can be content because, or through him, Jesus, who gives me strength. To which we'd say, yeah, but it's not strength we want, Paul, right? We don't need strength. We need more income, right? We need a bigger house. We need the nicer car. I need the better job. I need to have the healthier marriage. It's not strength that I'm looking for, Paul. I'm looking for how to be happy. To which Paul, I think, would say, shh, I know. But listen. God has come in the person of Jesus, and he's given his life for us. Do you know what that means? And hoping that he doesn't actually ask us what it means, we just kind of nod our heads, kind of just gently. He says, it means that if God's willing to give his life, his best for you, then the God who is over and above and responsible for and in control of all things, that God is for you. That there is a benevolent God who has control over everything, and he's for you. We'd still just kind of nod like this. And he'd say, do you think that God would withhold from you anything? Do you think he would hold back anything from you? Don't you think that God, that your heavenly Father, would always make sure that you have enough? To which we say, but enough compared to what? Because if God's going around handing out enough, I want their enough, right? I want that enough over there. Like, my enough, I'm not so happy with. I want that enough. What enough do you mean? And so Paul, in another letter that he wrote, where he's talking about similar things, he's talking about challenges and difficult circumstances and the kinds of things that make us wonder if we're going to have enough, that cause us to be anxious and concerned about enoughness. Here's how Paul describes it there. He says, and we know this, that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. To his purpose. Paul's saying, look, when I was shipwrecked, when I was being hunted down, when I was hungry, when I didn't have enough, when I didn't think that I was going to have enough, you know what I found over and over and over again in all my circumstances? You know what I found? I found Jesus just one step ahead of me, calling me into his purpose. Every single time, in every situation, I found my Savior a step ahead of me, inviting me further towards him, inviting me into his purpose for me. And you know what I found every single time, in every situation, I always had enough for the purpose that he was inviting me into. What if the circumstances that you find yourself in are perfect for the purpose that God is calling you into? So, 2 of our kids are going back to school here in a couple weeks. 1 into 2nd grade, 1 into 4th grade. And so we did the back to school shopping last week, and they went out. And they each, had their list of like, this is what you need and this is what you need. So they got their backpacks, right? And they went down the list of all the things that they needed to have in their backpacks so they would be ready for school. And they're so excited about it because how exciting is back to school shopping? I mean, school not so much, but back to school shopping. I mean, you can't beat shopping. They're so excited and they come home. They want to show like, here's what we got. Here's what's in our backpack. And one had one set of things for second grade and one had one set of things for fourth grade. And for like the only time in the life of our children, there wasn't a like, but he has, but she has. Like there was no like looking into each other's bags and why don't I have that and he has this and mine doesn't, I don't have in my bag what he has in his bag. Because they knew. They were going into different circumstances and they were going to need different things. There were going to be different things required from them. One was going to need things that were going to be required of a second grader. One was going to need things that were going to be required of a fourth grader. One was going to be learning the things that a second grader learns. One was going to be learning things that a fourth grader learned. That they had different things in their backpacks because they were going for different purposes. We each have our own backpack, and it's filled with your income, it's filled with your time, it's filled with your family, it's filled with your career, it's filled with your friends, it's filled with where you live, it's filled with the decisions that you've made in your life, it's filled with your past experiences, it's filled with everything that makes you you. And what if that backpack was packed perfectly with everything that you are going to need for the purpose that God has right in front of you? That the time that you need, you have perfect time for what God has put right in front of you. You have the perfect amount of resources for the things that God's calling you to right in front of you. That you have the perfect experiences for what God's calling you to right in front of you. And when we look around and spend our times looking at what's in other people's backpacks, God's like, no. That's packed for a different purpose. I'm taking them down a different track than I'm taking you down. They're going to serve a different thing that you're going to serve. They're going to reach different people that you're going to reach. They're going to steward their things differently. They're going to learn things differently. I'm going to teach them things differently than I'm going to teach you. But what you have is perfect. Perfect for what I intend to teach you. Oh, I have so much that I want to teach you, and everything that you have is perfect for it. There are things that I'm going to show you and teach you about yourself, and what you have right now is perfect for you. Oh, there are ways that I'm going to grow you. You have everything you need for all the ways that I'm going to grow you right now for purposes that are further down the road. Just trust me, you have everything you need right now for the purpose that's right in front of you. And you know what happens? You know what happens when we shift our focus from what do they have in their backpack and what do they have in their backpack and focus our attention on what is the purpose that God has right in front of me? You know what happens? We discover that we have enough. That God has given you enough time for the purpose in front of you. He's given you enough experience for the purpose right in front of you. He's given you enough resources for the purpose that he has right in front of you. He's calling you out. He's like, just follow me here. Follow me right where you are. There are things I'm going to teach you. There are things I'm going to show you. There are ways that I'm going to stretch you right now. They're going to be so uncomfortable, but it's going to be so valuable for what I'm calling you into down the road. Just trust me right here. You have enough. And you know what? Happiness researchers have concluded, they look at happiness and what makes people happy and what are correlations between what people do and happiness. What they found over and over and over again is that when we pursue purpose, what we end up finding is happiness. To which Paul would say, I know. That's what I said 2,000 years ago. God is inviting you into purpose. And when you follow him there, you will find that you have enough. And what you ultimately find is happiness. And so like we've said throughout this series, is that we don't want to just know what makes us happy. We want to actually be happy. So we've been talking each week about what is a micro practice. Like, we're not going to give you homework for like, here's how to revolutionize your life around purpose. But it's like, what's just one small thing that we might be able to slide into our busy lives this week that might help us to shift our focus from comparison to the purpose that God has in front of us. So here we go. Number one. I invite you this week to notice when you are comparing yourself to others, when you are evaluating your happiness by the happiness of others. Just notice it. That's it. Just notice when you're doing it. When you're scrolling through Facebook, you're scrolling through Instagram, and you just notice like that, you know that feeling that comes up when everybody else has bigger, better, nicer. Just notice it, number one. Number two, when you've noticed it, just breathe. Just take a breath and mark that noticing of comparison. And what that breath does so much good stuff. It does blood stuff, does neurological stuff. It gives you a pause. It builds a pause into your life. That breath is so helpful. Just notice it. Take a breath. And just ask yourself, am I willing to believe I have everything I need for what God is doing in and through me? Am I willing to believe I have everything I need for what God is doing in and through me? We're going to do this together. As uncomfortable as it is, we're going to do it together. Ready? Here we go. Am I willing to believe I have everything I need for what God is doing in and through me? That's it. Just practice that this week. Just to help you learn to shift your focus from comparison to the purpose that God has right in front of you. Because we know this. We started the whole series out with this. What makes us happy? And we answered this the first week. No thing. There's no thing out there. There's no place you can go to. There's no thing outside of you that can make you happy. What makes you happy? You do. You have power over. You have control over. You have responsibility for your happiness. You do when you pursue God's purpose for you. What you'll end up finding is happiness. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. I'm so thankful that you guys joined us for this. If it has been, number one, we're glad. But number two, we hope that you'll join us next week because we're going to continue our conversation about what makes us happy. And we would be glad to have you here with us. Would you guys pray with me? Oh, Father, we are so grateful for you. For your grace, for your mercy, and for your generosity. To make sure that our bag is packed full. That we have enough for the purpose that you are calling us into. That's so often right in front of our face but goes overlooked because we spend so much time looking at what you've put in everybody else's bag. But Father, we pray you would strengthen us, you would encourage us as we seek to continue to walk towards you and shift our focus from comparison that just trains us towards discontentment to focus on the purpose that you're calling us into that will ultimately lead to our happiness. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.